Okay, we're good to go.
Thank you, everyone. Welcome to the June 17th, 2021 meeting of the Comox Strathcona Waste Management Board. I'd like to call the meeting to order. I'm zooming into you from the unceded and traditional territory of the Comox Nation. In response to the COVID-19 pandemic, we do not have in-person attendance at our meeting. So if the public would like to provide any input, please contact our Legislative Services Department. This meeting will be broadcast live and recordings are available at the comoxvalleyRD.ca/minutes-agendas page. Which you can easily search for it, and on YouTube. So the first item is the call to order and approval of agenda. I understand Director Abrams has a motion to put forward regarding the agenda.
Yes, thank you, Director and Chair. I would like to, I guess I have to move that item 8, which is a short recycling issue, be moved to the beginning of the meeting, as I have 2 overlapping federal and provincial meetings that start at 10 o'clock.
Could I have someone second that?
I'll second it.
Great, thank you. And staff, you're able to hear who's first and second?
Yep, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any comments on that motion to move item 8 up to the beginning of reports? Okay, hearing and seeing none. Is anyone opposed to that varying of the agenda? Okay, hearing and seeing none, that motion is approved.
Move that the agenda be approved as amended.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Any comments? Hearing and seeing none. Anyone opposed? And that is carried. The next item that we have is adoption of minutes from April 22nd, 2021.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Does anyone have comments or questions on the minutes? Hearing and seeing none. Anyone opposed to adoption of minutes? And that is carried. So our next item is moving on to reports, and we have item 8. So if you can switch to your agenda, so that for the varied agenda, the Quadra Community Engagement and Recycling Transition Report for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
And over to staff.
Thanks, Chair Hamir, and good morning, directors. Russell Dyson is not able to attend today, so I'll be sitting in for him. And I believe Stephanie Valdal, our CSWM Services Coordinator, is on the line and can introduce this staff report.
Yes, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes,
perfect.
Great, thanks, Stephanie.
So staff have received permission from Recycle BC, if there's interest within the community, to upgrade the existing Quadra Island CSWM recycling depot to a Recycle BC depot, which would include the ability for residents to recycle depot-only items like glass, other flexible plastic packaging, film and outer wrap, as well as foam containers. And so staff would like to officially begin engagement with residents on Quadra to assess their interest in the conversion of this recycling depot. And we have prepared a communications plan, which is attached for review, director review and approval. And we would like to begin this engagement formally in July with sessions to gauge interest, and then host a second communication session with the public in September.
Sorry, Stephanie, sorry, I'm just going to interrupt. There are some counselors, I believe, who haven't muted. If you wouldn't mind muting so that it's not interrupting staff. Apologies. Go ahead, Stephanie.
Sorry, so staff would like to begin engaging with residents on Quadra Island officially in July, and then follow up with a second engagement session in October. In addition, staff are requesting permission to host an extended producer responsibility cleanup on Quadra in September of this year. for all extended producer materials such as batteries, light bulbs, paints, some household hazardous waste, and electronics. And we're really excited to engage with the residents on Quadra. We've hosted one informal session and it's been very successful. And we have another informal session at the CSWM Depot on Quadra scheduled for tomorrow. Are there any questions?
I see that Director Abrams has his hand up. Oh, you're muted, Jim.
I was trying to be good and be muted. Okay. Thank you very, very much for the report, Stephanie. And the very first thing I want to do is say to the entire board that we have an incredible resource with Stephanie and Vivian working in this position. They have completely won over the community of Quadra Island, which is not easy to do. And their events that they have been putting on, their informational events, et cetera, have been very well received and are going to be very well received. So I'm completely in favor of going ahead with this with a couple of comments that I just like to make. I had a meeting, an in-person meeting before COVID with your CAO and I think James and a few others about a process to move to a Recycle BC site. And that process would include 2 in-person public meetings once we got out of COVID. Well, we didn't know we were in COVID yet, but at some point we would have 2 official meetings at our community hall. So that has been confirmed by Russ that will still be in part of the plan. In the meantime, Stephanie and Vivian have proceeded to attend events on Quadra Island and educate people and give people feedback, whatever, on the whole issue of changing over. This is a major change for recycling on Quadra Island. And I think it'll be a positive. The EPR collection event, can't shout out enough for that one. It's been asked for years, so we finally got it. But I want to make sure that the 2 events that are scheduled, they shouldn't be anything but informational. They'll not be decision-making tools, nor will the survey that is going to go around. They're only to inform the discussion that will later take place in person. Senior staff have committed to that, and I'm holding them to it, I hope. And I'm hoping that the site that is chosen will be the industrial site. It's perfect. It's right close to the ferry. It's not congested. There's buildings there already. There's hard surfacing. There's everything needed, and security, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, this would be a huge savings money-wise to go there. The EPR event, it should also be at that site, not at our community center in September, because September is the start of the Children's Center. It's the start of all the programs, and our community center is already completely jam-packed, parking lot-wise and otherwise. So I'd just like to say to staff to please not even consider the community center for that EPR event. A question that I have to Vivian is, there was mention in the report of removing the garbage bin. The garbage bin that's there now in our recycling site is a locked bin. Only the contractor has a key to it. And it is there for the contractor to be able to clean up all of the messes that people leave and, you know, wind blowing and things like that, to keep the site tidy and clean and presentable on behalf of the Solid Waste Management Service and on behalf of our Quadra Island recycling program. So I'm hoping that we can reconsider that and have a garbage bin locked for the use of the contractor only, so that there will be no littering on the site. Otherwise, that litter is all going to have to be taken somewhere else, maybe to somebody's private trash can or whatever. Garbage collection was also mentioned in the report to be talked to people about on Quadra. I would sincerely ask that we not get into the whole topic of garbage collection. A huge island to collect garbage from. It's done by private contractors now and taken over, and people pay the contractor, and the tipping fees are all built in and all that. So I really don't want to confuse the issues, and I don't want to overload the community with two major changes. So if we could just take that garbage collection issue right out of the mix, I think we would be far better off in getting a productive answer out of these sessions that are being so diligently set up by Stephanie and Vivian. And I think that's about all I have to say. I'm definitely in favor of moving forward with this. So you got my vote, and even though I have to leave later, if other things come up, you know how I feel.
Great. Thank you, Director.
Thank you very much for varying the agenda. Thank you to the whole board, and thank you to Chair Hamir for allowing it.
No problem. I believe Director Arbor has a question from the boardroom.
Yeah, thanks. And I agree with Director Abram. This is really good news for Quadra Island in terms of an initiative. I know on Denman and Hornby Island, we've had a lot of success with trying to add as many materials and be part of those programs. And it's really appreciated on the islands to have a one-stop solution. Yeah, I'm fully supportive of that initiative. And in terms of the question to staff is, away from the islands, you know, we continue to have requests for people for more comprehensive solutions. Is there a day where we will see more materials being captured in the pickup services across our municipalities and rural areas?
I guess I'll put that over to staff.
So staff are continuously looking for ways to recycle more material. And so recently we were approached by both Denman and Hornby Island facilities with regards to the ability to recycle textiles. And so staff are working with our local Salvation Army because they are currently recycling textiles. We do understand that there may be an extended producer responsibility material category coming for textiles through the on-corp return it depots. And so we are continuously looking for more information and collaboration, including collaboration with some of our current contractors like John Ellis from Pacific Wood Waste to try and discover ways to get rid of some of the higher materials that we receive at our facilities. So we are always looking for ways to increase diversion, and we will continue to do so.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions, so I'm going to call the question on receipt. Is there anyone opposed to receipt of that report? Hearing and seeing none, that is carried, and we have a recommendation.
I would like to move the recommendation.
Moved.
Second, Arbor.
Moved and seconded. Any comments or questions on the recommendation as shown on the slide above? Okay, hearing and seeing none. Is there anyone opposed to the recommendation? Great, and that is carried. Many thanks. We're going to now. We're going to go back. You're welcome. We're going to go back to the top of the agenda, the Comox Strathcona Waste Management Advisory Committee minutes for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Moved and seconded. And are there any questions or comments? Hearing and seeing none. Is anyone opposed? And that is carried. Item number 2, the AVICC Earth Week Cleanup Challenge 2022 report for receipt.
Move receipt.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Hillian, and over to staff.
Thanks, Chair Hamir. And again, I'm happy to introduce Stephanie Valdal to introduce this staff report. Stephanie?
Thank you. So as you know, the CSWM service hosts up to 3 community cleanup events in communities around the service area every year. And the first event is generally in conjunction with Earth Week. So this year, the service hosted their Earth Week community cleanup in the city of Campbell River. So many thanks to the city for hosting this event, as well as to their staff. We were able to host a bin on city property, as well as coordinate advertising through the city of Campbell River. And the event was actually hugely successful. And it was successful in large part to our stakeholder relationships. We had large participation by Mosaic Forest Management this year. They donated cut-proof gloves to our volunteers, brought water and snacks. We also had multiple local businesses participate, but really the highlight was a inter-club challenge between our local Rotary clubs. And so we had 7 of our local Rotary clubs participating, 5 from the Comox Valley and 2 from Campbell River. And word spread through the Rotary International Organization and attracted some interest from Port McNeill and Port Alice. And so our Comox Valley clubs competed against our Campbell River clubs, and which competed also against the Port McNeill and Port Alice. And collectively, we were able to remove 16 tons of material from the environment, which was actually pretty amazing. As I mentioned, there were multiple key players, but really the success was in the volunteerism that we saw and the positive feedback that we received from residents who volunteered and participated in this event. Volunteerism really promotes social inclusion and commitment to community, but particularly during a pandemic, volunteerism can help with anxiety and depression, and it can also provide residents with a greater sense of purpose. As we enter into COVID recovery and as our coastal communities begin to welcome tourists back to our communities in 2021, we're hoping to fully reopen with 2022, and staff can really think of no better way to showcase our beautiful communities than welcome tourists back in 2022 to see our communities at their very best. And so to foster this positive environment and to share our successes with some of our member municipalities and our neighboring regional districts, staff are requesting permission for an intergovernmental Earth Week challenge for 2022 to include all communities within the Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities. I'd love to take questions.
Thanks so much, Stephanie. Does anyone have questions?
Yes, Madam Chair, it's Director Lee here.
Go ahead.
I totally support the cleanups, and they're normally taking place on the beaches and the foreshores of our east coast of Vancouver Island and the west coast, and it's a great idea. However, I wondered, I've been working with Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure to request that garbage receptacles be permanently installed in front of some of our more popular beach locations where we have a few hundred people a day on beautiful days like this going down to Stories Beach, other beaches nearby, and where Ministry of Transportation used to provide garbage receptacles in the parking lot and take care of them. They now are refusing to do that. And what they do is they let the garbage blow around all over the place, and they have employees go out and with big picks and pick it up once every few weeks. That's putting a lot of strain on our local residents to try to clean up after people that leave their garbage blowing around. And I would like to see possibly solid waste program. If Ministry of Transportation cannot provide this service, I would like to see some of our more popular locations have garbage receptacles installed where we organize the placement and pickup of garbage at the very popular beach locations. I think that would tremendously reduce the amount of garbage that we have to clean up every year.
Thanks,
So
Director
could
Lee.
I put that on the radar for the staff to look into? Stories Beach is the one I've been working on most intensely. White sandy beach in my area, that's just beautiful. So
Okay, I think staff will make note of that. I note that it is a little bit off topic for here, but and although it contributes to the waste cleanup for these weeks, it's something that we can maybe bring up as another item.
okay,
And I'd be in favor to hear that. Director Adams.
Thank you. As a member of the Rotary Club of Campbell River, I can say that the participation in the challenge with the Rotary clubs was met with a lot of enthusiasm. People had a great time doing it, as we always do. Also want to mention the Greenways Land Trust were part, and it wasn't just beaches, it was the Greenways Loop and the ERT Trail and off the highways. So really great initiative, and look forward to doing it even better with more participation next year. So thank you.
Thanks, Director Adams. I don't see any other questions or comments on the report. I'll just give a minute. Okay, hearing and seeing none. So on receipt, is there anyone opposed? And that is carried, and we have a recommendation.
move the recommendation.
Moved
Second.
and seconded. And any comments or questions? Hearing and seeing none. Anyone opposed? And that is carried.
Madam Chair, I have a subsequent recommendation, and that would be that staff investigate the possibility of garbage receptacles and pickup at popular beach locations in our service areas.
Okay, if that's a motion, does it?
Yeah.
Do you have a seconder?
Second.
No,
Okay, that's seconded. Comments around that? So we're just asking staff to investigate the possibility. We're not asking that to actually happen. Director Adams.
Thank you, and thank you, Director Lee, for adding this. I know Stories Beach and Saratoga Beach are areas that could certainly benefit from this, but the question for staff is just to consider that it's the scheduling and frequency of pickup that will be probably the most challenging. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Does staff have the motion recorded?
Yes, Chair, I've got that staff look at the possibility of placing garbage receptacles in popular beach locations.
Okay. Any other comments on that motion?
Just a correction, I believe Director Lee added placement and collection.
Mhm.
And I didn't hear that in when staff read it back. So just
Okay, I will add that in placement
And
and
the word-
collection.
And the word was investigate rather than look at.
Investigate. Okay, thank you.
I'll
Okay.
speak on it, Chair, after.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I'm generally in favor of the investigation, but I also want to note that in the rural areas where we don't have garbage and recycling pickup, a lot of people actually use those types of opportunities for their household garbage. So I think staff I would like them to give consideration to that as well. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Yes, very true. We see that in our parks in the Comox Valley. Any other comments on that motion? Okay. Hearing and seeing none. Is there anyone opposed? And that is carried. Now, before we move on to item 3, I would just like to make an announcement. We have had a couple of staff members who have been recognized for their efforts around community cleanup in our area. Stephanie Valdal and James Barth. So you've just met Stephanie. She is the winner of the 2021 Paul Harris Award presented by the Rotary Club. The Paul Harris Award was created in memory of Paul Harris, who established the Rotary Club over 109 years ago and is the highest recognition presented by the Rotary Club. Stephanie Valdal, diversion coordinator for the CSWM service, has played a key role in the success of a number of waste diversion efforts, in particular her work through the illegal dumping and ocean plastics debris cleanup program. Stephanie has been instrumental in working with our communities to lead, coordinate, and create awareness of waste cleanup initiatives across our region. The successes of the CSWM waste cleanup initiatives are being shared across the Solid Waste Management Board network through AVICC and the Rotary Club. On June 10th, Stephanie was awarded the prestigious Paul Harris Award to acknowledge the outstanding contribution and exceptional service for the community. So I'll allow you to unmute if you would like to clap, but I can clap on it. So thank you, Stephanie. And then secondly, James Barth is the winner of the 2021 Environmental Awards for the Nonprofit Sector category, presented by the Recycling Council of British Columbia. James Barth is the founder of the Facebook group Stop Comox Strathcona Illegal Dumping. James has been monitoring and conducting cleanup activities of illegal dumping materials in the Comox Valley since 2012. Recognizing that illegal dumping poses health, safety, environmental, and economic threats to our community, James has been donating his time to clean up illegal dump sites across the region and has helped to advocate, educate, and bring awareness to issues surrounding illegal dumping, improper disposal, and special events waste diversion. James has assisted staff with outreach, community events, and education since 2018, and staff look forward to our short time left together before James's official retirement. This year, James has two major milestones, a birthday milestone and as an illegal dumping volunteer, a volume milestone. James has collected over 100,000 kilograms, and staff would like to present him a certificate in recognition of his work. Sadly, we were hoping to do this in person, but we cannot wait any longer to acknowledge his huge milestone for James Barth, and we are glad to see RCBC has recognized his efforts as well. Thank you very much to James. So amazing, both of you.
And Chair Hamir, if I could just mention, congratulations to both Stephanie and James. James is actually a volunteer in the community. He's not a staff member, but certainly we recognize the volunteer efforts that he has made and contributed towards the great work of the community.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
clarifying. Wonderful. Yes, love seeing so much great initiative in our community. All right. Moving on, we have item number 3, the CVWMC Cell 2 budget amendment for receipt.
Move receipt.
Moved
Second.
and seconded, and over to staff.
Thanks, Chair. And Cole Mackinson is on the line, I believe, and Cole is our manager of CSWM Capital Projects, and he'll be able to introduce this report. Cole?
Thank you. So we're midway through design of Cell 2, and the budget for this year was set at, the total budget is 8.8 million, 800,000 being spent this year and 8 million in the 2022. We're looking to amend the budget by moving $1 million from 2022 into this year to complete some additional work that'll alleviate operational constraints and just front end some of the Cell 2 construction. And so we're recommending to amend the 2021 budget and 2022 by just reallocating the $1 million. I'm open to any questions if there.
Cole. Do any directors have any questions of Cole? There we go, Director Grieve. And you have to unmute.
Have to use this or get too much echo. The question is, are we ahead of schedule on filling up our numbers 1 cell? Because some may know that the 3 rural areas in the Comox Valley are exploring the possibility of recycling and garbage and yard waste collection in order to divert even more from the landfill site. I think that it's important to note that on my taxes anyway, and most people, I think we're paying over between $80 and $100 to Comox Strathcona Waste Management. And that would probably increase if we are continuing to fill up these cells at an accelerated rate. And I just want to know from staff, is that the case? Are we still filling the number one cell with the, I think 30% organics and even probably another 10–15% of products we already have markets, recycling markets for already? I think it bears to note for the public that you're paying one way or the other here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We are on track for what our projected tonnage was. We're always looking at diversion strategies. So with the regional organics compost project coming online next year, we're hoping to see a reduction in our tonnage. But cell 2 is needing to be constructed for the timing of padding out with select waste and operational constraints of access roads and landfill gas infrastructure. So it's on our track, but the more diversion we have, the longer these cells last.
Thank you for that. Are there any other questions for directors on the Zoom? So not a new tax requisition. It's just moving around budget years. Okay. So on receipt of the report, is there anyone opposed? And that is carried. And we have a recommendation.
Move the recommendation.
Second.
Moved and seconded. And comments or questions on the recommendation? Hearing and seeing none. Is anyone opposed? And that is carried. Item number 4, the CSWM management report for receipt dated June 20th, 2021. Thank you.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Anyone have any questions on the management report? Hearing and seeing none. Is anyone opposed to receipt? And that is carried. We were supposed to break out at 10:30 for item number 5, but we are way ahead of schedule. So if possible, could I get a motion for us to vary the agenda so that we can speak to item number 7?
So move, Arbor. Second.
Moved and seconded. And any comments on that? Questions? Hearing and seeing none. Is anyone opposed to us varying the agenda? And that is carried. So we'll move on to item number 7, the Recycle BC eligibility update for receipt.
Move receipt.
Moved and seconded, and over to staff.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to introduce Sarah Willey, our solid waste analyst, who will be able to introduce the staff report. Sarah?
Thanks, James. Just pulling it together on my end here. I'm not going to lie.
Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. I was all set for the C&D. All right. So thank you very much, Chair, through the Deputy CAO. So this report summarizes a long history that we've had with Recycle BC and our request for moving our CSWM depots over to staffed facilities. So we had a conversation with them beginning back in 2019, and we did receive a response recently. So in that response, they look at some eligibility criteria, and those eligibility criteria, while not public, they sort of hint at a few things. So in their response to us, in terms of a depot on Quadra Island, a depot at Oyster River, and the potential for a depot in the southern part of Campbell River. They recognized that the travel constraint of having a residence on Quadra Island, that and the population of the island met their criteria, and they have offered to have a depot funded by Recycle BC beginning in 2022. So as Stephanie has already outlined, staff are going to be working with the electoral area director and residents to determine siting options and investigate service levels for that depot. Unfortunately, despite being approved previously, the Oyster River Depot at this time did not meet Recycle BC's criteria for approval in 2022. That is not to say that they will never meet their criteria. They just have their own resource constraints and financial liabilities in that they have fixed revenue and they need to make sure that they're not bringing on too many expenses or financial liabilities at once. So there is the potential that this depot could meet Recycle BC's criteria in the future. We do think it is well located centrally, and we hope that that they will consider it. They also cited proximity to other depots. So 4 Recycle BC depots located within 30-kilometer driving distance. That accessibility criteria is something that's being discussed right now within the product stewardship world, and something that we are responding to as they have identified criteria for both rural and urban settings that we want to make sure represents Comox, Strathcona Waste Management's best interests. We're going to continue to look at the location in Oyster River, though, and determine options and improvements looking forward. As I say, we do think this is a strategically well-located depot, and we want to support it going forward. For the same reasons that that depot was not considered, the City of Campbell River southern location was also not eligible for 2022. So again, we're going to consider strategically whether that location works well for CSWM, and we're going to look at our depot network with a broad view, to continue to support communities' needs, but also to consider how the CSWM resources are distributed across the region, and whether we can include locations like those within our future financial planning. So we'll be bringing a report back that evaluates both those depot locations in the September timeline. Thank you. Free to take questions.
Thank you.
I have a question, Madam Chair.
Okay, I think I'm going to just acknowledge Director Adams had his hand up first, and then I'll move to you, Director Lee, and then Director Cole-Hamilton.
Thank you, Director Amir. Just a heads up that I will have a subsequent after receipt of this motion.
Right, thank you. Director Lee, go ahead.
My concern with the report was that it indicated that there are recycle depots within 30 kilometers of the Oyster River location. If that's true, it's not true for most people that live and use the Oyster River depot. I'm really concerned about the amount of garbage that's going to come to the landfill that should be recycled once the Sportsplex location shuts down. Willow Street is on the far north of the Greater Campbell River area, including Oyster River, and not convenient travel-wise to get to. And a lot of people are just saying, I'm trying to recycle, but if the regional, solid waste program is going to make it so difficult for me to get my recycling to the proper places, then my stuff is going in the garbage. And I've heard that from more than a few people. And when I look at the volumes that are going through at the Sportsplex, and thinking of that shutting down within the next fortnight, where's that going to come to? Probably to Oyster River next. And Oyster River's already at capacity most of the time. So I think there's got to be some temporary measure put in to accommodate people who still want to recycle in a convenient distance from their homes. And I'm talking about Willow Point, that area. I mean, where are they going to take all their stuff? So I'm anxious to hear Director Adams' motion when this is all over.
Thank you, Director Lee. Director Cole-Hamilton.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for the report, Sarah. And I just wanted to ask a question just about the recycling BC's 30-kilometer radius issue. I'm obviously, it seems to not take into account the existence of ferries, which are a fairly fundamental feature of life in our region. Is that something you've had discussions with them about as to how that impacts the the apparent availability of another option?
Yeah, the accessibility criteria have been a conversation for years and years with the product stewardship representatives. They're represented through Stewardship Association of British Columbia, SABC, and the sort of sister association is the BC Product Stewardship Council. And so that's a group of staff members from regional districts. So they've recently reissued what they've considered a draft on accessibility. So that's SABC has put forward a draft on accessibility. And certainly it's not regulation, it's not even a target, it's really just them putting it forward. So we are responding as a group to that, and until it's included within an approved plan that each stewardship organization has to put forward every 5 years, it's not sort of in standard or in set in stone. They have considered the ferry issue. That is why Quadra did get accepted because of that travel constraint. And they did consider ferries as well when they looked at the curbside eligibility. So they've been a bit more transparent right now with their curbside criteria. It's still in draft. They put it to the ministry. They got a COVID delay, but they did include ferries in that analysis, sort of to the detriment of islands when it came to curbside, in that they have to meet the population requirement on their own. So we couldn't combine, for example, the population of Denman with the population of Area A within CVRD to create a service population of 5,000. Denman Island itself would need to be a population of 5,000 to be eligible for a curbside program. I think what they're trying to do with that, though, is to support depots on islands, recognizing that they do have a cultural value to islands. And so I think that that criteria in that case isn't necessarily bad. The 30-kilometer issue, certainly it's a rural standard right now. I'm sorry, it's an urban standard of 30 kilometers, and it can be very difficult in highly congested areas. So travel time is something that Metro Vancouver is looking at, where they're actually using Google Analytics to determine how long it really takes somebody to go 10 kilometers across town. So yes, we are definitely engaged in that, and we want to make sure that they're trying to represent our communities as best we can. I think Recycle BC generally is one of the easier ones to work with, although they do have some strict rules and they don't always say yes. There are other programs that are much more difficult and much more adversarial in their conversations with regional districts.
Great, thanks, Sarah. Appreciate the context there. It sounds like you're well into that discussion then.
Yep.
Thank you. Director Grieve.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair. Well, hopefully the New Canada Census will bring some new information forward on the population, especially the population of the southern part of Area D and northern part of Area C. I'm sure it's well and above 5,000 people. But my question to the staff is, we already know that these unattended sites tend to have a lot of contamination. And do we have any idea of how much of the material that is put in those unified recycling bins actually ends up in the landfill anyway?
Yeah, I don't have that number at my fingertips. I know we did look at that analysis when we considered closing some of those unattended depots. The number that's coming to mind is around 17%, something like that. We certainly know that attended bins have lower contamination rates and do result in not just more recycling that can be delivered to the recycling facility and not to the landfill, but also in more marketable material through their sorting. So that is a strength that we hope to bring with a staffed depot, and also that reassurance that downstream reassurance that a program like Recycle BC brings to the destination of recycled materials.
Thank you for that, Sarah. Do we have any other questions or comments? I don't see any other hands up. All right, so on receipt, is there anyone opposed? And that is carried. And Director Adams, you had a subsequent?
Thank you. And first off, my apologies to staff for not having this prepared for them in advance, but I will send a copy if they require it. But I would like to move that staff be directed to write a letter of reconsideration for a Return It Center in South Campbell River or Area D, with significant growth in South Campbell River and Area D, and the distance to the current Return It Center and the closure of the recycling depot at the Sportsplex. There is considerable concern for illegal dumping and other unintended consequences.
Second, Director Evans.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. And would you like to speak to the motion, Director Adams?
I think we all already have,
Okay.
so I won't go on. I think it's self-explanatory. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions regarding that motion? Director Hillian.
Thank you, Chair. I believe the ED of Recycle BC lives in the Comox Valley, and I wonder if there might be consideration to having that person invited to address the Waste Management Board on this issue. It may lend some gravity to the letter.
I think that's an option that our staff could consider inviting the AD. Thank you. Any other questions? And Lisa, I'm just going to double check you have the wording for that motion.
Thanks, Chair. I think I've got the general idea, although we will get it from Director Adams. But so I have that staff be directed to write a letter to Recycle BC for reconsideration of Return It Depot in Campbell River Area D. Is that the gist?
So,
Madam Chair.
What I can do is I can write it out and email it to you, but it is for South Campbell River or Area D.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I would like to make a slight amendment to the motion. Rather than saying Area D, I would say Oyster River, because that's where we have our recycle depots right now, and they're actually legally in Area C in Black Creek.
Director Adams, sure. Director Adams, is that considered a friendly?
I want to give as much flexibility as possible, so I wouldn't take it, but I certainly appreciate that that could be part of the conversation should we get any appetite from Recycle BC to even engage in any conversation.
Well, I'd like to make a formal amendment to put forward Oyster River, because we already have a serviceable recycle depot at Oyster River with plenty of parking around it, and it is a good location. If Recycle BC would reconsider that as a Recycle BC depot, it would make sense to put it there, and that is not in Area D. That's in, if you wanted to be broad about it, say Oyster River, and that would cover both Area D and C, but I'm hoping they'll look at the current location.
Okay, you put a motion forward.
Chair, I will take take that as a friendly.
Okay.
And it's fine with the seconder as well.
Thank you.
Okay, so that would be, and Oyster River.
So I'm just going to go back to staff. Lisa, have you been able to capture that, the nuance of the location?
If I could just confirm, so we've got South Campbell River or Area D and Oyster River?
No.
We're taking Area D out of it.
South Campbell River or Oyster River.
Or Oyster River, thank you.
Yeah, and I mean, to be clear, if I was making the motion, I'd say and the current location in Oyster River, but you know, if they have to move it, but I think it's a good site right now where it is.
Okay, I think as to Director Adams' comment about giving Recycle BC enough flexibility, we'll just try and keep it as open and slightly vague as possible. So we have that motion on the table. Would anyone else like to speak to it? Hearing and seeing none, I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed? And that is carried. Thank you very much. I'm just checking the time. So we're at 10:20. I don't think we have enough time to start another item on the agenda. I'll propose that we take a short recess, but come back for 10:30. With staff, is that all right if we start right at 10:30?
Yeah, I think it is, Madam Chair.
Great. So stretch your legs, grab a cup of tea or coffee, and we will be back at 10:30.
Looking good there, Chris. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, how are you? Just trying to get the glare off the camera.
Yeah, that looks good.
I'll just keep moving it in closer and closer if the sun changes its position.
Okay, we'll just get a full close-up by the end.
Nice. Perfect. I'm just going to mute and take a phone call, but I'll be good to go by 10:30.
Thanks so much.
Morning, Sarah. Tom here.
Morning, Tom. Thanks so much for joining us.
How are you?
I'm doing all right. Yeah.
Good.
How are you?
Good. Do you want me to set up my screen sharing now, or is that later?
I'm going to have a short presentation first.
Okay.
And then Chris is going to do the first presentation. So
perfect.
Yeah,
okay.
get it all on deck there, and that sounds great. Have you got a camera as well?
I do, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Great. See you there. No problems. Awesome. And I saw that Pat had joined us as well. Thank you, Pat.
Yeah, I'm here, Sarah. How's that?
Looking great.
Pat.
He wanted to be on the solid waste board. He couldn't help himself.
One chance. I get one chance. This is it. Is Minion sick today? Oh, there she is. No, she's down there. Hi, Nicole. Are you feeling better?
I am. Maybe allergies.
Yeah, that's good news.
I didn't know I was muted when I said, oh, Pat. So hello. Welcome.
Sarah, I'm going to take my video off just to save bandwidth because our internet's good, but video kills it. So I'll put it back on when it's time for me to be on, and then when I'm active, but I'll keep it off just in case.
Awesome. No problem, Chris.
And I uploaded the presentation this morning.
Okay.
As a backup.
Perfect. I'll
okay.
Go and grab that if I need it. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is maybe where I should be.
And Jake or Lisa, I'm just scrolling through the names here, but trying to see if we've got our other two presenters on board yet.
Sorry, Sarah, did you ask me a question?
Yeah, that's okay. I'm just looking to see if Adam or David have joined us.
I don't have anybody in the waiting room right now, but I'll keep my eye out here.
Okay, that's okay. Just some of the names were a little bit vague, so I wasn't sure. Thank you.
Yeah, so can I just confirm that there'll be people screen sharing?
That's right. I'll be screen sharing as well as the presenters.
Okay, do you want to try and see if you can do it? We just, some of our general account settings are disabled, so I just want to confirm that you can actually do it, if you don't mind.
Not at all. Yeah, I'm getting a host disabled participant screen sharing.
Okay, so I'll just make you the host at that point.
I've also got that, Sarah, when I tried to engage the screen share button.
Great. Okay, thanks, Tom, for letting us know.
Hey, Patrick. Welcome to the Waste Management Board. And sorry to hear that you're leaving.
Thanks, Sarzina. Yeah. Yeah, I put my formal resignation in this week to council. It was hard.
Our loss, Nova Scotia's gain.
Like cool old hardwood. Crazy to even think it's happening. So yeah, it's happening so quick. We're excited.
Good. All right, I will call the Comox Strathcona Waste Management Board meeting back to order. Thanks, everybody. We are on item number 5, the roundtable discussion regarding demolition and construction waste. This was brought forward by through a motion by Director Cole Hamilton to do a deeper dive into this. We have a guest panel of speakers. So I guess I should first of all ask for a receipt of us going into this roundtable. Or a motion.
Move receipt.
Second.
Moved and seconded. And I'm going to turn it over to James to introduce the speakers.
Thanks, Chair Hamir. And yeah, we're really looking forward to this this first roundtable for today, the panel presentation, as you mentioned. Staff have put a fair bit of work into organizing this and coordinating it. So I'm going to turn this over to Sarah for a little bit of context and information and that introduction to the panelists. So Sarah.
Thanks, James. I'll just, Lisa, if you're all set, I am to take over the screen share. Great. Thanks very much, everyone, for joining today. Very excited to be discussing this topic with you today. It's something that, as staff, we've certainly been talking about, but are excited to now have the capacity to really bring forward the beginnings of a fulsome conversation. So why construction demolition waste? Just want to give you guys a bit of a context for our region as we move forward with our panelists and their broader knowledge from around the province. So construction and demolition waste, commonly known as C&D, sometimes also construction and renovation and demolition waste. We have a solid waste management target to move our diversion rate from 51% to 70%. We have bounced between about 48 and 54% over the last 5 years. As we've discussed before, we've identified within our solid waste management plan, as well as through our waste composition audit, where our greatest opportunities are for diversion. The 3 main identified programs and projects that we could do to reduce our waste within our 2012 plan was food waste collection from residents. And we started that pilot in Cumberland and Comox, and we have successfully been able to eliminate food waste from those communities. And we look to expand, of course, with the construction of the regional organics facility. And through that construction, that will also develop organic capacity for IC&I and accomplish, 2 of those main high targets that we had within that plan. The third and largest, as estimated within the plan at 11,500 tons, which is maybe a little bit ambitious based on the next slide. But that really is the next piece of the puzzle for us as we try to achieve that 70% diversion. So we've made some great progress and it's time to look forward. This is also a really great time to start these conversations as we approach the planning process for the solid waste management plan next year. There is, through that process, the ability to approve bylaws and things like waste stream management licensing, and that is basically licensing facilities that receive diverted materials so that we get reported quantities back from them, so that we can keep an eye on where those materials might go and sort of generally how their operations are working. And tools like that being passed through the solid waste management plan, it's good to start these conversations as early as possible because they do have larger consequences. They're not a straightforward conversation. So you will recall from the report that we presented in, I believe it was March, we looked at where the opportunities are. So that 11,500 number is a little bit ambitious. So we do see within our garbage stream right now that we have about 11,000, 10,500 tons of disposed construction waste going into the garbage. But of that, 11,000, we know that not all of it is easily divertible. So that the figure on the left shows, the different materials based on our waste composition audit. And some of them, as you know, are a little more easily recycled than others. A very straightforward one would be metal, for example. An emerging market, something that we know is out there, but is a little bit difficult and a little bit expensive, might be carpet, things like that. So treated painted wood, the largest component of that 11,000 tons, is a very difficult material to successfully recycle or divert. And so you can see achieving that 100% of the 11,000 is very, very difficult, and we want to set our goals and expectations realistic. We also want to celebrate some of our achievements. So we do have diversion streams currently for scrap metal, for clean wood waste, for drywall, as well as cardboard. And so we do show that those C&D material streams that we dedicate resources and space to are a significant portion of the diverted materials at our landfills in Campbell River and Cumberland. With 62 and 34% on average of the material by ton that they're handling. So certainly we've made some headways there, and through some tools like tipping fees, variable tipping fees to encourage diversion. So what are we looking at here? I'm grateful for staff at the municipalities for sharing with me some of their building permit information over the last few years. And when I look at how many homes we're taking down, I think we all see the boom of population of people coming over that maybe have a bit more cash if they've cashed out, and they're looking to renovate or to build anew. And those activities, of course, create significant amounts of waste, and that's what's contributing greatly to that 11,000 tons. So demolition permits issued combined between Comox, Cumberland, Courtenay, Campbell River municipalities and the CVRD are averaging about 62 per year. And that's a significant number. To put that into context, that's the same number as the entire city of Victoria, who have just launched a very significant campaign and are looking to have bylaws approved to move towards deconstruction and a zero waste goal. So the material composition of a single family home. So this is from some pilots that have been done in Metro Vancouver and the city of Vancouver and compiled by the city of Victoria. It just gives you an idea. It's certainly not, this is a 2,000 square foot home, but it gives you an idea of what's in there. And of course, in the older homes, that lumber is old growth lumber. It's straight and it's strong, and it certainly isn't easy to come by these days. Concrete and asphalt is one that's often diverted through demolition currently, and certainly is a large weight component. But lumber is not only valuable as a resource, but it is also an organic material. So when it ends up in our landfills, it decomposes and it does generate greenhouse gases. So there's many reasons there to encourage the diversion of that material stream, which is by weight the largest component of a house demolition. Again, you can see we've also got metals, we've got drywall and plaster, and there's opportunities there, of course, for diversion currently. And then that third category, roofing, siding, doors, windows, finishes. Some of those materials as well are being salvaged before demolition, but not all of them. And so there's again room for improvement there. So just to kind of, very high level, speak to some of the sticks and carrots that are being discussed and implemented in other communities. Variable tipping fees, material bans and surcharges at the landfill. House moving is another big piece of this conversation that we didn't have capacity to bring in at this point, but something that we'll continue to look at. Of course, we've all seen the houses on Dyke Road that Nickel Brothers stores, so it's definitely a part of our community. Deconstruction, salvage, and recycling bylaws, permit deposits to incentivize that diversion tracking and reporting requirements associated with those permits, a dedicated space for materials at transfer stations and landfills, supporting local processing capacity and markets, and there's many ways to do that, of course, and then tried and true toolkits, education, awareness, starting at the grassroots. So there's a lot of things out there that we're going to be able to learn from in the future. But we know that we've got some knowledge gaps ourselves. So, we've got a lot of stakeholders that we need to bring to the table for this discussion. Today's conversation is a great first start, but we do want to let the board know that this is not the whole conversation. So we're going to be looking forward to bringing into the conversation other private landfills accepting construction demolition. We see a big disparity between C&D accepted in Campbell River and in Comox, and I think a large part because of those private landfills that do accept that material. And so they're part of our network as well. Vancouver Island Construction Association, we're lucky that they've been engaged in these conversations already through some of the work being done down island. And so they're going to bring a very good perspective to this because it certainly impacts them. Our municipal planning and building officials, a lot of this relies on partnerships and on collaboration, and we hope that we know that they're going to bring in a perspective as well. We've got many private recycling partners actively working in our area: wood waste, concrete, and asphalt companies, carpet recyclers. The list is endless there. So that's a sector that we'll talk about. As I mentioned, house moving companies, and of course, demolition and bin rental companies. So the folks that are out there facilitating demolition currently. So lots to learn in the coming months as we move through this process. But I'm really happy to have our 4 speakers join us today and get us started. So we have 4 great panelists. We've got Chris Arkell from Sea to Sky Removal. We've got Tom Bescher, I hope I'm saying that right, Habitat for Humanity from Vancouver Island North. And as well, you see that Tom's joined by Pat McKenna. David Behan from Demex Construction joins us, Demex Deconstruction, apologies. And Adam Cornell is joining us from Unbuilders, and he's joined as well by Dan Armshaw. So to kick us off, we're going to start with Chris here. So I'm just going to unshare, and Chris is going to share.
Hey.
And let me just give you the bio spiel while Chris gets set up. So Sea to Sky Removal is an award-winning B Corp certified construction waste removal company, fully focused on landfill diversion. They meticulously hand sort all recyclables to maximize diversion, as well as separate any reusable items from actual garbage. They live load materials into their trucks and take them to the right places to be properly disposed of, recycled, or donated. Strive to meet the highest standards of verified social and environmental performance, public transparency, and legal accountability to balance profit and purpose. I first met Cincy and Chris, co-founders, about 5 years ago at a young professionals event for waste nerds. I was working for the city of Vancouver, adding material streams to our recycling depots. And Cincy quickly followed up with me on what I was going to do to support diversion for businesses, especially in the construction sector. No beating around the bush with these two. They bring boots on the ground, small business, lived experience to divert waste from construction sites. Usually inseparable, since he unfortunately couldn't be here with us today, but Chris will be coming to us from Powell River, and they operate their business throughout the Lower Mainland and the Sea to Sky corridor. So thanks very much, Chris.
Thank you. And I'll share screen. Oh, there we go. Okay, how's that look?
That looks great.
Okay, perfect. There we go. Well, thank you, Sarah, for inviting me today. And thank you for your continued leadership and drive in this important discussion. Good morning. My name is Chris Arkell, co-founder of Sea to Sky Removal, along with my wife and co-founder Cincy Sear, who unfortunately couldn't be here today. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that I'm on the traditional and unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, the traditional territory of the Tla'amin First Nation. I'm really excited to be here along with our friend and ally, Adam from Unbuilders, and I'm also looking forward to learning more from David at Demex, as we will be making a trip there in the next week or two. We've been looking forward to it, and now that the travel restrictions have opened up, we can visit exotic Vancouver Island again. Okay, so let's begin. We service construction sites who have no space for a bin, as well as companies who want to build greener and don't want to use one. How our service works is that we hand sort through the endless amounts of garbage bags, as well as large piles of construction waste by separating recyclables, reusable building material, and lastly, general garbage. We open up all of the garbage bags on site, and in them there will usually be recyclables such as metal, plastic, cardboard, bits of drywall, compostables such as an apple core, and of course, lots of single-use coffee cups. We even go to the extent of separating plastic sheets from the tape that most of the contractors use as protection in their separating. Once everything is pre-sorted, we live load our trucks systematically to efficiently drop off materials to the correct locations, such as recycling centers, any suitable local non-for-profit organizations, and lastly, the landfill. We always donate any reusable building materials such as windows, doors, lumber, plywood, light fixtures, appliances, furniture, sinks, and cabinets to not-for-profits such as Restore, part of Habitat for Humanity, or Urban Repurpose. We provide our clients the option to deconstruct their projects properly so that the materials will end up being in a usable condition, and also usable condition to donate. And also we offer discounts as an incentive to do so. Ideally, it would be great to have more places that reusable building materials can go, or a free section at the transfer station. This is wish recycling. We are at a pivotal point in our industry with how our waste is being disposed of. If we stand any chance of averting a climate catastrophe, we must start with the construction industry and change the way we build from conception to completion of projects. Ultimately, it is the waste that needs to be reduced and stopped, as everything will have an end of life. How do we deal with that end of life is the change needed. In an ideal world, all builds would follow our green approach to waste management practices. Source separation is a key component to achieving maximum diversion. We have created and implemented award-winning on-site recycling stations that are labeled with metal, cardboard, and plastic. That gives the crews the opportunity to not throw materials into a general bin or pile, but rather into its proper place. Yikes. From every recycling station we service, we end up diverting 300 or more pounds of recyclables per service. There's a huge opportunity to shift the way the construction industry throws away material, and we've seen the dramatic results these recycling stations have created. It's infectious, and the crews are very excited to know they are making a positive impact. One of our biggest wins was a construction company that used a bin strictly for garbage, or what we should be calling it single use, and then had our recycling stations in front of the bins so that crews had a chance to recycle versus throw everything into one bin headed to the landfill. We serviced the site 5 times and ended up diverting 2.5 tons of recyclables from entering the landfill. The only feedback for this project we would have had is just have a bin for clean wood as well as another for drywall. Lastly, if they also implemented a strict reusable mug policy, the amount of actual garbage would have been surprisingly very low. More contractors we are working with are starting to put our recycling stations in front of the bins, and this is a huge, huge win in our eyes. We recently launched a toolkit on our website, so any construction company in the world can access information on how to set up a station on their site, along with downloading signage and tips to make diversion easy and a priority. We as an industry also need to start being vocal about where this material ends up, and also the facilities and infrastructure that is currently lacking to handle the volume of waste we create. At the end of the day, we want the construction industry to be managing the waste they create correctly by keeping usable and recyclable materials out of our fragile landfill. We have been collaborating with municipalities on the types of construction materials coming through the waste stream and highlighting problem materials. We also sit on 2 C&D focused communities to create solutions with industry leaders. We continually raise awareness in the construction industry by providing leadership to shift our current disposal practices. As a small business, we have created the tools, provided education, and also have a huge responsibility to provide solutions that minimize the climate impact of the structures we design, build, and ultimately throw away. We have found that the main way to do this is through source separation of waste on construction sites before it hits a bin. We've found that the ability to be able to separate the material before it goes into a bin is huge with maximizing diversion. And to hit numbers like you were wanting to go from 50 to up to 70%, we personally feel this is one of the easier ways to achieve that is to have the material source separated and try and limit the numbers of bins that are used on site, because it's virtually impossible to be able to separate once they're in a bin. So thank you very much. We're glad to be part of this conversation, and we look forward to seeing the other presenters.
Thank you so much, Chris. Yeah, appreciate appreciate all that context, and I know you blasted through, but we've got lots of time for questions. So hopefully everyone took some notes and can come prepared for some great conversation following this.
Perfect.
Just for those who are looking, please do just jot your questions down, and we'll sort out how to ask them at the end here, whether it's orally or written. So for our next presentation, excuse me, we've got two folks with us today from Habitat for Humanity, Vancouver Island North. So Habitat for Humanity is a national nonprofit organization that's been working towards a world where everyone has a decent and affordable place to call home since 1985. They operate 2 restores, one in Campbell River and one in Courtenay, which I'm sure we've all been to at one time or another. And these stores help to fund the construction of new homes. New and previously used building materials, home furnishings, and appliances are donated by local businesses and private donors. Founded in 2004, Habitat for Humanity Vancouver Island North Society is based out of the Comox Valley, serving northern Vancouver Island from Bowser all the way up to Port Hardy. Through their fundraising and recycling efforts, they've built 22 affordable homes in the Comox Valley and 17 in Campbell River. Tom Bescher, the Director of Retail Operations, will be presenting to us today. Tom manages needed resources to achieve Habitat for Humanity Vancouver Island North's missions. A qualified airline transport pilot, Tom spent 25 years in the aviation sector, serving the United Nations and various relief agencies in the Third World. He's been involved in nonprofit leadership since 1997, including past positions with Vancouver Island Music Fest, Salvation Army, and Comox Valley Housing Task Force. Many of you are also familiar with Pat McKenna, the Executive Director, and he's joining us today as a resident of the Comox Valley for 14 years and Executive Director for the past 6. An active member of the community, Pat has been a sitting councillor with the town of Comox since 2018, but I understand his hometown of Antigonish is called him back, and he may be donating some furniture to the restore relatively soon. So thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us. And Tom, I think you've got a presentation that you're going to share. If Lisa can let you be the host, you should be able to take care of that for her.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks for the invite and the introduction, and and good morning, everyone. Let me see if I can share my screen. Oh yeah, here we go. Oh, wrong screen. I'm sorry. Hang on.
As if it wasn't complicated enough. We've all got 2 screens now. And
always find that in between the screen share, there's like 30 seconds, a great joke could be told. So I think that's how moving
forward.
Pat. Yeah, unappropriate joke. Haven't got one.
I need a standby recycling joke. My only joke is about a fish. Doesn't really hold.
Oh, there we go. Can
there
you
we
see
go.
that?
Yeah, you're good.
Yay. I'm also in charge of IT at Habitat, so forgive me for not being on the ball on this one. Okay, so we're Habitat for Humanity and Vancouver Island North. So we're one of many national affiliates within Canada. I think there's about a total of 100 restores in every province and territory across the country. I'll start with our mission of what we do. And as Sarah indicated, we bring communities together to help families build strength, stability, and independence through affordable home ownership.
And we should say, I'll just interrupt. We're coming to you today from the unceded territory of the Comox First Nations.
Thank you, Pat. Our vision is a world where everyone has a safe and decent place to live. And just a really quick background in terms of what Sarah had indicated. We build affordable homes for local families. We've just completed serving 10 families through a phased project on 1330 Lake Trail in the Comox Valley, and serving another 11 families in Campbell River. And we're on to 2 more properties in both communities. And the reason I mention that is most of you know what we do. a lot of you probably don't know how we do it. And that's where the restores come in. They're one of our, they're our social enterprise and provide a significant amount of funding to enable us to provide these homes to families. Restores in Canada, we're celebrating 30 years. We started in Winnipeg in 1991. And to commemorate the 30 years, we were featured as in the Waste Reduction Week program in Canada. Last year, we diverted a total of about 43,000 tons of product from landfills. So that diversion currently is through, housewares and furniture and appliances, not going to the landfills, but rather coming to us for repurposing. We're in every province and territory, 100 stores nationally. And in total, in our 30 years, we've diverted about 950 million pounds of household items. Our current scrap recycling program includes, a lot of the things that Sarah indicated earlier, wire, metal, appliances, tools, lighting, and electronics. In both stores, Courtenay and Campbell River, we actually take wire and we strip it down. We take aluminum windows and strip the metal out of them. And this is all done by volunteers that come in every day and enjoy doing this. And so that's our scrap recycling program. But then we also resell a lot of these items that have been diverted from the landfill, including furniture. This is in order of sales volume. Furniture, housewares, including small appliances and large appliances, fridges, stoves, dishwashers, washer dryers, tools and hardware, lighting, and kitchen cabinets. Now, this is fantastic. This is a program that's grown over the last few years in that we partner with contractors and private individuals that are renovating their homes. And we will come in and pull out the cabinets, the existing cabinets from their homes and offer them for sale in the restore. This is fantastic for people that are putting in, secondary suite or building a cabin or want some cabinet work in their garage. And oftentimes the cabinets we get are actually of such quality that that people can use them to renovate their main kitchen. As I had indicated, the top categories, we had pictorial of the first 5. Number 6 is building supplies. And this is an opportunity, an area for growth. This would include lumber. We don't get as much lumber as we could handle. And you can also see that towards the bottom, numbers 12 and 15, we've got doors and windows that if the doors and windows are in good shape and can be repurposed, then we encourage people to donate them and then we resell them. So how to help? Currently we get a dump fee reduction, and more is better always. So there's an opportunity for considering a further discount. Sarah and us were talking about a potential donation point at the landfill locations where we could come on a rotating basis to with other charities or social enterprises to pick up product. We also sell Skyrocket at our stores, so consideration of donating Skyrocket to our venture, and above all, making people aware of what we do, even at the point of them dropping goods off at the landfill or through other campaigns to point them in our direction as a viable alternative to dumping stuff at the landfill. And that was just a happy picture, and that closes me off. Thank you for your time, and Pat and I will be around for questions later on. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Tom. That's great. Really, really opened the door to the behind the scenes there. So just that red bar at the top, perfect. I don't know why it's the only button that's at the top of our screens when you're using Zoom, just to really throw us off. So again, thank you, and let's welcome our next speaker, David. So David Behan from Demex Deconstruction, Inc. David with his wife, Charla, are the owners of Demex Deconstruction, as well as Demex Interiors, both located in neighboring Coombs, Vancouver Island. Branded as the land of stuff, David has a sprawling 10-acre site and 50,000 square feet of covered storage for used and new construction and home decor items. His facility boasts an impressive inventory of everything for the home, including a complete line of in-stock building materials such as lumber, cladding, windows, doors, cabinets, flooring, live edge, plumbing, furniture, home decor, lighting, and more. And Demex has been around for about as long as I can remember. My parents' business was just down the road growing up, and seeing that yard over and over probably contributed to my own interest in resource recovery and recycling. With years of experience in the retail of used building supplies, demolition of homes and buildings, as well as the development and construction of many homes himself, David brings a self-described capitalist perspective to our conversation today, and I look forward to finding ways to support businesses like his by increasing the quantity of used building materials salvaged. I am cognizant that David disappeared from my screen as I gave that introduction. So let's just see if he's still with us. David, are you there? I feel like he might have just stepped away to grab a phone call or something. He's just jumped onto mute. All right, while we wait for David to come back, we may have to jump over to you, Adam. I hope you're ready. I feel like you're always ready, though. All right. You guys are going to have to remember that introduction for David, though, because I'm not going to repeat it. Oh, there he is. I see him. Can you
Hello. Hi.
Perfect. That's okay.
I have a very weak signal. I was on the downstairs signal, not the upstairs signal.
Welcome. Well, I've given you a grand introduction, and the stage is yours. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, all. Thanks for the invite. Demex Deconstruction has been in business since 1996. It started by a man called Alan Parkin. Myself and my wife, Charla, took it over 5.5 years ago, just over 5 years ago. Demex is located in Coombs on a 10-acre yard and is comprised of multiple buildings. At Demex, we estimate we divert approximately 100,000 tons, 50 40-foot trucks per annum of reclaimed materials, waste materials from landfills, and also B-grade materials or oversupply. Often companies over-manufacture, or they produce a B-grade that needs to be disposed of or marketed, and it allows for a B-grade to go through at a fraction of the cost of new A-grade. So that's an important part. We currently process the following: reclaimed lumber, reclaimed steel, used windows, used doors, B-grade plywood, B-grade bathtubs, toilets, sinks, other bathtubs, steel roofing, and all things miscellaneous. Given the WCB rules and regulations, most demolition buildings demolished buildings are taken down by a machine, resulting in very limited reclaimed materials being realized recovered. Manpower is limited in the field when it comes to the processing of used building materials. Pulling nails is a difficult job, time-consuming task, and that's at the best of times. Demand is high for reclaimed products, given the pricing. However, the supply is limited. We have some fears, though, and some unintended consequences that could come out of a fee-based solution. We fear adding more process and or cost to the complex building process could have unintended consequences in adding to the cost of home ownership. Currently, the cost of a home is out of reach for a large part of our population. And adding a free structure or even a refundable deposit could have unintended consequences to those people either trying to enter the market or those people looking to upgrade their current home. Resulting in an increase in rental demand and or resulting in cancelling of renovations in current homes, therefore having an economic impact. As we continue to add cost to the process to the housing industry, we continue to increase the fallout on the very bottom of the market and potentially adding to the homeless population. If we make homes more expensive, rental properties will follow and people will possibly fall out of the bottom of that. That's a big concern. All our communities are struggling with how to deal with the homeless issue. I know it's made up of different socioeconomic circumstances and mental illness and drug addiction, but there's also people who fall out. There's a percentage of people who fall out of the housing market or the rental market for economic reasons. So really fearful of that. I think that's a huge point, that we don't put more people in danger of losing their home. At Comox, we're challenged with material supply, labor ability, WCB constraints, and bureaucracy on all levels. Okay, we feel the building community is overwhelmed with the amount of process involved in getting a building permit or a demolition permit. And by the time they've completed the task involved in getting a permit, they are late to start and need to regain any time possible in the building process. This puts reclamation on the back burner and almost ignored for the most part. Those are my points, my concerns with this. The market is overpriced and very exuberant at the moment. And with the current CERB and whatnot, everybody is short-staffed. So I believe there's a bit of a paradigm shift there on what work people will do and won't do. And this is on the won't do list for a lot of people. However, it does add value into the economy. Comox does this because of profitability. Yes, we're doing a lot of good things, but we primarily do it because we can make money at it. If we can't make money at it, we won't be around for long. So the interesting thing is the volume we are now at is enormous. That's it for me today, folks.
That's great. Thank you so much, David. Really appreciate your perspective on this topic. Certainly been in the industry for a long time, and as you say, you come at it from that business perspective. So it's great. So joining us next, we've got Unbuilders. So Adam Corneal from Unbuilders is a builder and entrepreneur with an extensive background in deconstruction, reclaimed woodwork, and passive house construction. He flipped his first house at 16 with his father and launched Unbuilders Deconstruction in January 2018. Passionate about his family and community, skiing, hiking, mountains, and spending as much time outdoors as he can. Sounds like he should live here. Adam's committed to providing a sustainable future for generations to enjoy. As founder and CEO of both Unbuilders and Heritage Lumber, I've seen Adam speak at least a half a dozen times now, and I'm always so impressed with how far he's pushed the conversation for deconstruction and how much he's moved the needle, not just in policy, but in action in these few short years. He's always incredibly generous with his time, and I'm excited that with Dan's help, he has expanded his company to our backyard, and they have a few Vancouver Island projects under their belt already. Adam's joined today by Dan Armishaw, who is the company's Vancouver Island operations lead. thanks very much for joining us, Adam.
Thank you for having me. I'm not sure. I've got slides if
Great.
that works.
Yeah, Lisa will just
to,
make you host and then you'll be able to present.
I'll try to blast through them before, yeah. I mean, I've got a few, I have a bit of a different opinion than David on the housing and affordability crisis with in regards to deconstruction, but we can talk about that in the chat after. I think he raised a good point, so I want to definitely touch on that after.
Great.
Which is a concern that we've heard from the industry as well, from the building industry, of the concerns of the rising cost. Okay. So yeah, I want to first acknowledge that I am presenting on the traditional unceded territory of the Squamish, Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh peoples. And I was just talking to Dan this morning about how we sit in this really interesting position with the current narrative of reconciliation in the fact that we are deconstructing typically colonial housing, recovering these materials that are a lot of old growth lumber that were stewarded by the First Nations peoples before Canada was a country. And we have this, we're trying to work with several local First Nations. I've just been talking with the Squamish Nation here about getting the lumber back into their projects and how there's this beautiful tie-in of reconciliation with that. I don't need to introduce myself, but I'll introduce the problem. So we have two companies, Unbuilders and Heritage Lumber, and we're two parts of this deconstruction service, which is really a shift from a linear economy to the circular economy. So I'll blast through this quickly. Sarah already touched on it. Construction waste is a massive contributor to our solid waste. I think that in Comox, it looked like your numbers are actually even higher than the national average for how much demo waste is generated as a total of the solid waste in the stream. Canada-wide, it's about 37%. So that translates into 4 million tons a year, which decomposes into 20 million tons of CO2 that goes into the atmosphere just from our construction demolition waste. 1.5 million tons of that is lumber. 100% of that can be either salvaged or recycled. And then a high portion of that lumber is old growth lumber. So it's highly valuable and there's no reason it should end up in the landfill. Traditional demolition, as we all know, is really just taking the building down as fast, cheap, and quick as you can with very little regard for any material salvage. No regard for it. So this house is fully intact still with windows, probably still cabinets and appliances in there. So this is really what we're trying to lead the way in shifting away from. What has been done in the Vancouver region is they introduced a green demolition bylaw, which is a first step. It's really a very small baby step for change from traditional demolition. And I don't think it had the consequences that the city was hoping for, which just made every demolition company crunch the house and dump the lumber at a recycling facility instead of at the landfill, which the wood is then just mulched up and burnt for energy as a biofuel. So you're still releasing that carbon into the atmosphere. It's very hard to call that a progress for climate change. So I want to really make the point that I don't think that if Comox Valley is looking at deconstruction policy, my recommendation is to go right to deconstruction, not to take this intermediary step of green demo, which is really sort of a joke that you can classify it as that. And this is what green demo looks like. So you're still taking your house and you're mulching it up, and we're counting this as recycling, and the demolition contractors are posting about how great they are for the environment, when this is, again, this is very hard to call this progress on a industry level. Our solution, we actually work with Demex. We've been selling material to Demex since we kicked off on the island. So it's great to have them and their experience, as well as Habitat for Humanity. We haven't worked with Tom yet, but I'm sure we will. We work heavily with Habitat for Humanity in the Lower Mainland and somewhat in Victoria. And so we've actually formalized a rebuild hub here in the Lower Mainland with the Habitat for Humanity, which Unbuilders deconstructs the buildings. The non-lumber is going to go to Habitat for Humanity as a donation, and Heritage Lumber, our other company, brokers the material. And soon we just received grant funding and investment to start remanufacturing building products with our material, as well as do R&D to try to automate the denailing process through machinery and automation, and also automate the lead paint removal from wood to get a lot more of that wood out of the landfill and clean the paint off of it so it's reusable. So we're up to a lot of things and trying to really push not only on the deconstruction side, but on the material reuse and how do you make these materials safe to go back into the industry, and how do you make that process as cheap as possible. As David said, it's really expensive to denail materials and to really deconstruct properly. And so we're trying to look at how do we automate that and reduce that cost so it's not a huge sink to an owner. And this is the difference of what a deconstruction looks like. This is a crane deconstruction we did. So again, we're trying to compete against demo, which is much faster and it's cheaper than deconstruction typically. Utilizing a crane for our buildings, this would have been a 3-week deconstruction. On site, it was a 1.5 days instead with the crane. So we were off site after a few days, and the builder could build 2.5 weeks earlier than we had initially scheduled because we were going to do it by hand. So this is one of the ways we've evolved. We don't do all of our projects with the crane, but the ones that make sense, we do. And then just touching on what these materials are, it is old growth lumber. So I think that anything we're seeing sort of pre-1970, because even some of our projects in the 60s and 70s, we're finding incredible, true dimensional old growth lumber on Vancouver Island. So we were blessed with so much amazing material that we're still seeing it in our projects that are later. And it's a scarce resource. We don't cut old growth 4-dimensional lumber today. Shouldn't cut any of it. But the only place you find dimensional lumber from old growth is locked behind the walls of our buildings. And that's why we really need to push to recover it. And reclaimed wood in general has 12 times less embodied carbon than new lumber, making it the greenest building material on the planet. And old growth lumber is typically about 3 times stronger than new lumber. So it's a better wood. There is many different things you can do with reclaimed wood. I won't go into detail here. Just a few different pictures from projects from my past when I was a builder. But really, any project that is going to utilize wood, they can utilize reclaimed wood and have a much lower carbon impact. And the positive impacts from deconstruction in general hit on many levels. The environmental ones are very obvious. And the last one that I haven't touched on is just the fact that our landfills are overflowing. So I know Vancouver, Victoria landfills are going to be closing 10 to 12 years early, or expanding 10 to 12 years early because of primarily C&D waste overflowing them. There's also the added social impact that deconstruction provides. Not only do we enter a community when we're doing our service and really become entrenched in the community, and we see a really negative reaction to a typical demolition turn positive. But then our partnership with Habitat for Humanity ensures that when they sell the goods to Restore, they are building affordable housing. So it's in hiring deconstruction, you're directly contributing to the construction of affordable housing. And lastly is the health issue. So on our deconstructions, we typically have 2 abatement callbacks to remove more asbestos once we peel layers back, which shows us every demolition that's happening in our communities still has asbestos in it. We're still exposing our community and our transfer stations to these contaminants. And the only way to actually fully abate a project and get these materials into the safe disposal channel is to deconstruct them. And lastly is the economics. Deconstruction and material reuse, as David touched on, is really good for the economy. Deconstruction generates a ton of jobs, 5 extra jobs to every demolition, and same with material reuse. And it adds, our conservative numbers are the shift from demolition to deconstruction would add about 250,000 jobs across the country. And that does not include all of the offshoot activity. And it would add about $19 billion to the economy. And again, that's just in deconstruction service and selling wood at wholesale. So lastly, in order to shift policy, which is sort of the subject matter of today, we've worked with Victoria, we've worked with Vancouver and many other regions. We're starting to work with the province of BC on policy changes. I'm adamantly supportive of this, obviously, not only just for the business, but also because it's the right thing. If we're gonna create a lower carbon economy, we need to, as quickly as possible, look to ban demolition. In the discussion, we'll talk about what that looks like for affordable housing. I have a different opinion than David. I really don't think the wealthiest people in our society who are tearing down houses to build new houses, them paying a small premium to deconstruct them, I have a hard time believing that that's going to translate back to the lower income renter, because you're not tearing down a house for renters. So I think that that's a point primarily from the development side of things, that it's falling on deaf ears for those of us that don't own houses. And really, to do this properly, I don't think that you need to penalize people if they're going to demolish. I think you just need to give permits early for deconstruction or house moving. I think that's the quickest way to just nip this in the bud. And if you could give a deconstruction permit 4 months earlier than a demolition permit, everyone would choose deconstruction, even with the added cost, because they want to get moving. That's going to save them 4 months of holdings costs. And then if you have on the back end someone in the district checking the receipts to make sure that things were actually salvaged and deconstructed, then we're moving forward with banning demolition, really. So our tagline is, it's not waste, it's just wasted. And you can see the typical demolition site on the left and a typical deconstruction site on the right, and which one we need to move forward with to progress towards a cleaner economy.
Thanks so much, Adam. And I didn't include it in the intro because I didn't want to embarrass you if you'd already had it in your presentation, but he's a Dragon Den participant and winner. So if you can convince them, he usually makes a pretty good presentation. And
and we just received our investment from 2 of the Dragons.
Awesome.
Yesterday. Yeah.
Very cool. And just to touch on your comment about age of housing, so I did look at our age of housing we have here in CSWM, and we've got about 11% of our housing stock from 1960 or earlier, and we have an additional 30% from 1980 or earlier. Certainly, some communities have an even higher percentage. The village of Cumberland, for example, gets up to almost 50% pre-1980s homes, just because of course, the history of that community. So there's a lot of potential there, certainly for us. So I want to thank all the speakers and look forward to a robust conversation. I'm going to now pass the torch over to our chair today, Director Hamir.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And I also want to thank all of the speakers. It was really, really interesting to hear everybody's perspective and on the type of work that you're doing. I'm sure it's going to raise a lot of questions. So I already have one from Director Cole Hamilton.
Great. Thanks so much, Chair. And thanks so much to all the presenters. And Adam, I saw you presented a Climate Caucus webinar a couple of months ago, which is what got me curious about how we could explore this here in the Comox Valley. And I guess the affordability question always comes up in relation to housing. And I know you said that's something we could discuss in the chat. I thought maybe we could get the elephant or the dragon in the room out in the open and just talk about how you see the affordability issue in relation to the costs of deconstruction in the industry.
I can just sort of reiterate what I just said, and then I'm sure David could probably elaborate more on his side of things, because it is a definite concern. It's not housing is skyrocketed in general, and then building new homes or renovations, the materials have increased in a huge way in the last 12 months as well. So there's so many different factors in there. When you're just looking at demolition versus deconstruction, though, this is where I really have significant doubts that push. If you said, your demolition is going to cost you $20,000, your deconstruction is going to cost you $40,000 with a tax receipt. So right away, we're trying to offset that additional jump because we're partnered with Habitat for Humanity. You're going to get a tax receipt to make up that difference. So to you, the homeowner who's typically in the largest tax bracket, which that tax credit is quite substantial, your added cost for deconstruction, you're actually netting nothing because your tax receipt will make up that difference. If you're not in the highest tax bracket, I'd be shocked if you're moving forward with demolishing a house for a new one, or in general, if you're looking at having a rental unit or a housing unit, you're typically not tearing down to build something new on a small level like a single family home. You might tear down a single family home and build a 10-unit complex that you're going to rent out. And then when you're talking about the added cost to deconstruct that original structure versus demolish it, you're talking about like less than 1% in the total budget of construction. And again, I don't think that the added cost or time should be entirely pushed onto the developer or the homeowner. I don't think that that's fair. If we're trying to promote a greener economy from a policy level, then we need to incentivize it in some way. And that's where I think early permits and big penalties for demolition if you don't comply are the way to do it. So we'll actually give you incentive. You can build faster, you can get going, you can have less holdings costs because we'll build quicker. And then on top of that, we have our tax receipt model. So you're gonna net the same anyway. So really you should be coming out of this ahead, not behind.
Okay, thanks, Adam. And Chair, could I just follow up with one further question? Adam, can you tell the early permit policy you're talking about, have you seen that implemented in any particular jurisdiction, and what? Okay, that's not something that's
it was very briefly tried in Vancouver, but the permit department was struggling. I mean, Vancouver permits, you're like a year and a half for a building permit anyways. It's probably the worst jurisdiction for permit times right now. So it's one where they really could do this, because when they see a deconstruction check mark on a box, they can take that year and a half wait down to a year and 2 months. Some jurisdictions are releasing permits really quick. I don't know how it is in Comox Valley, in the various cities and districts, but it can be more challenging if you're actually very quick with your permits, because then you're actually looking at delaying a demolition permit to incentivize deconstruction. So I just see it as the simplest way to do it versus trying to come up with financial incentives or just straight banning it without any incentive, because then you're going to really tick off the entire industry.
Okay, thanks. I probably have some more questions, but I'll let others ask and come back in.
Thanks. And thanks, Adam, for that answer. I just wanted to, before I move on to other questions, allow some of the other panelists to weigh in. David, I don't know if you wanted to say anything, or Tom or Chris, about the cost of trying to move towards deconstruction, how it's impacting affordable housing.
I mean, I have something to say, not directly related to affordable housing, but one of the things to kind of tie into what Adam was saying about the economics of it, which you don't really hear talked about too much, is the economics of landfill expansion and landfills needing to grow. The cost borne by municipalities are huge. And a lot of the times with the expansion of landfills, they're not, I know as an example, District of Squamish did a landfill expansion that has just been completed, I guess, in the last 2 years. It was slated to be an expansion that was meant to last for 15 to 20 years. That was a 5-year expansion. So they're now 4 years into it, and they're already talking about needing to go for another 12 acres and millions on it. So the added costs of not doing anything to a municipality are huge, because you just have to continually be putting into landfill expansion and remediation, whereas going with a combination of kind of like our system, Adam's system, the donations, you're actively spending less as a municipality based on your need to not have to expand your landfills and hopefully reduce them. So there's that economic value for a municipality as well.
Thank you for that. David or Tom?
I agree with Adam's comment on this, on putting, making the permit process quicker for a demo done by hand, or where we're going to be able to retrieve some of the value out of that building. Agree with that 100%. The other one, what Demex does a lot of the time is we go into a house prior to the demo and we take the windows, the doors, the cabinets, the floors, the lighting, the electrical panel, the hot water heater, the fireplaces, the railings, any decks that has salvageable lumber on it. And we go through it, and then we significantly reduce the amount that's going to the landfill. So that's one method. I do agree, if you want to incentivize this, speed up the permit process. I used to be a developer. Prior to owning Demex, for 20 years, I was a builder developer. The timelines on getting OCP amendments, zoning amendments, crossings across Crown land for access, water expansions, water lines in, water treatment centers. I've done all these things. Sewage lift stations. The process and the amount of process that's involved in that and the amount of people that are involved in that is enormous. It's outrageous. I no longer build and develop for others. I build and develop for Demex today. And I'll give you another example, which is very, very recent. We're currently opening up another branch in Cobble Hill. We're working on that. One of the reasons we're putting it in Cobble Hill, the city of Nanaimo is 1 year plus to get a DP, if you get a response at all. So they sent me out of the community where I live, where I reside, to create jobs and build a 27,000 square foot building. So yes, we need to be good stewards of everything we do and take all the factors into view. But if we add a fee, in the end of the day, that fee ends up at the bottom of the market with the end user paying. And the waiter who serves us tonight or tomorrow deserves to have the right to buy a home. It's a Canadian dream. It's a North American dream. The more costs we bring into this process, whether it's through a renovation demo or a rebuild, the more people will fall out of the market. And that's fine and dandy for all those people who are not on the bottom end of it. But if you're on the bottom end of it, we're adding more risk here. We might push another 0.5% out. And I don't like that model whatsoever. I would benefit from it financially. But I'm telling you today, morally, I think it's wrong. We have too much process already. That's it.
For that. Thank you. And Tom, I don't know if you wanted to comment from Habitat, because it sounds like, you know, there may be a bit of a reliance on tax receipts, and I don't know if that's being done here on Vancouver Island before.
Well, we do offer tax receipts for gift in kind donations. That's a good point that you bring up. So anything, you know, whether it's deconstruction or household goods that comes through the back door as a donation is eligible for a tax receipt. One of the things we're finding that's quite relevant today is this, you know, the current state of lumber costs as it pertains to you know, our current project planning. I mean, we all know that there's been a spike of, you know, over 300% increases. Just, you know, go to Home Depot and try to buy a 2x4 that cost $3 a year and a half ago is now pushing $12. So what's interesting to us would be the potential of you know, gaining some of this lumber that's recycled and potentially utilizing it in some of our new construction. You know, that might be blue sky, because I imagine that there's a lot of, you know, we build brand new homes with, you know, new home warranty and all of that. So I don't know how that fits into the equation in terms of building inspection and permitting and that sort of thing. But it seems like there's an opportunity here for repurposing and possibly utilizing that product in new construction. So we're interested from that perspective for sure.
Great, thank you. I have a question from Director Morin.
Great, thank you. Just starting with a couple comments. yeah, really, really enjoying this presentation and the variety of ideas generated. So thank you to Sarah and other staff who pulled this together. You know, I've brought this up recently around this conversation, but my family, I would say, was one of the early adopters of house moving. My childhood home was moved from Vancouver when in the late 60s when of course Vancouver was demolishing buildings like crazy to build multifamily, you know, complexes, etc. So I've always been kind of surprised that there hasn't been more uptake of that. You know, that we don't move homes for people to live in rather than demolish them. So so I think that that's an area of exploration for sure. I also was really happy to hear the piece around reconciliation and how that it is part of this conversation in terms of returning old growth lumber to First Nations communities. So I really appreciated that. I guess my question would be around, of course, Victoria just passed a bylaw this week, I believe, around demolition, you know, banning demolishing buildings and instead deconstructing. And I just wondered if anyone could comment, including staff, around what other bylaws that could complement this process and maybe that have some, if you've got some, maybe some facts or outcomes around some of those types of initiatives, that would be great.
So maybe either Adam or Chris or any who are working in other communities, any other bylaws that you've seen, communities or policies that really support deconstruction?
Yeah, I mean, Vancouver was the first in Canada to put their green demo bylaw in place. I know they said it was the right intention. It was not the consequence they were hoping for, which is more companies like ours. And then you had Portland in 2016, 2017, basically take what Vancouver did and go all the way with it, which is awesome. You cannot demolish a building in Portland. And that's sort of what Victoria has looked at, is both those cities, what have they done? You're now seeing around the San Francisco Bay Area, there's a complete demolition ban as well that kicked in July. You're seeing Baltimore, Pittsburgh, Austin, Texas pop up with their own policy. It's ordinances, not bylaws in the US. So you're starting to see these pop up everywhere. And I truly believe in 10 years, you will see the end of demolition, traditional demolition as we know it. And in 10 years, we'll look back and say, I can't believe we used to demolish buildings.
Thanks for that.
I'll jump in there for the bylaws and
Please.
just say, to add to the deconstruction, which is much needed, is to also consider the actual build as well. There's a lot of material that is salvageable and recyclable and reusable that is just ending up in the landfill. Plastics are a huge one. There's a lot of plastics being used in the construction industry that have nowhere to go, mainly because there's a lack of infrastructure, and there's also a lack of bylaws to kind of force the hand of the contractors and the builders to have to recycle them and to have to be able to put reusable material back into the hands of people who can use them. So we're on a process right now of trying to make it so that we have the ability for the construction industry to actually follow through with what we're trying to go, progress to here. So yeah, there's a lot of the actual build that can be reused as well.
Thanks for that. Do any of the other speakers want to weigh in on that? Other bylaws that they've seen? Okay, I see first time speaker or question, Director Minions with a question.
Thank you, Chair. It was more just a comment. I just wanted to sincerely thank the 5 presenters that have come forward to tell us how their businesses are doing things in Squamish and Vancouver. And it was about 2 weeks ago, I was talking to a group locally that are somewhat involved in real estate that were just seeing how big of a problem this has escalated to being in the last 2 years. And so seeing there's companies out there doing it and starting and that might be able to be replicated is just really exciting. So I think of all the things we've talked about in the last year, this is one of the most exciting topics we can talk about to really get that third 35% out of the landfill. And so just focusing on how much the cost to not doing something is versus it costs 15,000, let's say, to demolish and 30,000 to deconstruct. The reality is those are not taking in those costs of what the landfills are costing in millions and millions. So just super excited to see this topic and already following all these businesses that we're seeing and looking really forward to the follow-up and seeing, what social enterprise, Pat McKenna mentioned something about social enterprise taking a stand in this, which I thought was a cool idea. So just saying I'm very thankful for the presentations and there's a huge opportunity here. So happy to see it.
Thanks for that, Director Minions. And just before I go back to Director Cole Hamilton, Chris, you mentioned plastics in the deconstruction not really having a home. And I'm wondering if you or any of the other speakers could talk about if there are other major waste streams that you're seeing in deconstructions that don't have a current diversion spot. And is there a role for local government to play in that diversion?
Most definitely. The traditional recycling programs that everyone knows, and the materials that can be recycled on a residential level, plastic bottles, plastic cup lids, everything like that, has a place to go and has a place to be recycled. The construction and commercial industry does not fall into those programs. So we are constantly advocating for the ability for us to be able to recycle our products. I believe most of the municipalities that we've talked with, their contracts are residential only, and construction materials are in need of a place to go. So we as an industry, it's kind of like the infancy of the recycling and everything we're talking about now. We've seen so much progress in the last year and a half. Even to speak to what I think it was Nicole Minions just said, this is an exciting conversation. 2 years ago, this wasn't really even being talked about the way that it is now. So we are in its infancy, but we're definitely pushing to have a place for the construction materials to be recycled and reused, and specifically the plastics on our end. From what we see, that's pretty much one of the hardest materials for us to actually do something positive with. Our last hope for that is waste to energy. It's kind of the bottom of the barrel for where that material would go. We would love to see the ability for that material to either be recycled or have bylaws that demand that these materials not be used in construction and have alternatives for them. So yeah, it's the infancy, but we're definitely getting there, but we're raising the issue to make it more apparent. It's a huge need that we have, and we're hoping to move forward on it.
For that, Adam or Tom, or would you like to chime in?
Yeah, I mean, Chris and I always have this conversation because we don't have a lot of plastics from the buildings we deconstruct, because the plastics are really sort of post 1980 typically. And then new construction, which is a lot more where Chris and Cincy operate in. There's way more plastics now than there were. So plastics are not an issue for us. Our issue is stucco doesn't have a place, and high volumes of particle board. So if it's really cheap kitchen cabinets and things like that, there's pretty steep tipping fees. And on Vancouver Island, lead paint is a huge issue. It's, for some reason, the Lower Mainland doesn't have this as strict a policy around it. We can actually recycle our painted wood even if it's lead contaminated. Whereas Vancouver Island, you can't. So it's really expensive to dispose of. And that's actually where Portland's been able to leverage their deconstruction policy in a big way, because anything lead containing, demolition or deconstruction, you have to remove it by hand in Portland. And so they were finding that meant the entire exterior had to get stripped anyways. And so you were having these buildings that were back to the wood shell by hand, and to deconstruct or demolish it, it was basically the same price at that point. And that's why they've had 100% adoption of deconstruction. So yeah, but the big materials right now are stucco, and I'd say insulation. I mean, maybe Dan can also provide a bit more on that for Vancouver Island, but yeah, those are the pesky ones for us. And then I guess the low value salvage goods, which David and Tom can probably touch on, because low value kitchen cabinets and appliances and fixtures, Habitat doesn't want them, Demex doesn't want them. What do we do with them? Because right now they're going to the landfill, or we put them up for free on Craigslist and we maybe get rid of 10% of it. But
that's
yeah.
our biggest problem right now, especially on Vancouver Island. Is just I know that through COVID, we're dealing with a lot, everything down in Victoria on the South Island. There's just not the right channels. They've shrunk down their store capacity. They have less square footage, so now they're not taking in as much. So they're quite, the Habitat stores that we've been dealing with aren't taking in as much of the kitchen packages, and even being pretty selective with windows. So at the end of the day, we're left with windows, siding packages, kitchen packages that they should have value, but they might not have value to that specific store, or they might not have room for that kitchen package. So at Unbuilders, we have to try to find other channels for those materials. Vinyl siding is another one that is, it's a difficult one depending on the house and the shape that it's in, but definitely the kitchen packages, closet doors, hollow doors. I mean, a lot of doors, unless they're doors and windows, unless they are in tip-top shape, the Habitat for Humanity doesn't want them. And often with the window packages, it's even difficult to give them away for free. So definitely, aluminum, obviously, they have no value and you're better off to recycle them. But that's a big challenge. But as Adam said, stucco is huge. It makes up for a lot of waste. And I feel like that is a big product with a bit more innovation that we could be finding another application for that. And, there was a huge phase in the 70s and 80s where people were just going and stuccoing over siding. So a lot of the buildings that we are deconstructing have stucco all on the exterior, just to get to that wood siding underneath, shake shingle, or, your lap siding underneath of it. But I think that that's something that we'll be able to find a channel for in the near future, hopefully.
Thank you. David, did you want to add anything, what you're seeing at Demex?
At Demex, we actually sell used aluminum windows quite successfully and have done for a number of years. They're used in chicken coops and farm buildings. We're in a rural type community. We sell to the islands. We sell to North Island, South Island. So there are high value products in the demo business, and there are low value products. The low value products are, you can't get your labor inputs back. The high value, you get your labor inputs back and a bit of a bottom line. Really, it's been a good discussion. There's everybody has their own point, and will push their own agenda. I've learned a little bit here today from the other speakers. So the differences in opinions are wide.
Right.
Housing affordability is an issue today. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. And thanks for pointing that out about the chicken coops. At least 3 of the municipalities here in the RD in the Comox Valley are adjusting their chicken bylaws. So maybe we can start having more diversion of those cheaper cabinets. Okay, so I have Noba, and then I believe Director Sullivan, and then Director Cole Hamilton, and then Pat McKenna.
Thank you. And thank you for your time and your clear passion in the work that you do. I just wanted to really note, I represent Cortes Island, very rural, very remote. We don't have building permits. There's certainly no demolition permits. There's, we're 2 ferry rides away from the nearest landfill, etc. So a lot of the mechanisms that are being talked about are applicable in jurisdictions where there are all of these permitting and bylaw mechanisms that we just either don't have or don't follow or have little regard for. And so I really honor the fact that you are working in the place that most needs you, where there's a lot of turnover in the market, and so much pressure and so many buildings coming down. But I also just want to keep us aware at the CSWM that we represent lots of rural areas like this on the islands, but also the First Nation communities throughout the region, the whole sort of Sayward Valley area where there aren't these kinds of leverages, regulatory leverages, and we are a lot more rural. So there's somebody here in the community that does demolition, like Adam's company, but at a massively smaller scale, and they do take out nails and they build sheds and keep stuff on their farm that people can then come out and buy resalvaged lumber. So I just also invite us to think about at the CSWM ways of incentivizing that aren't regulatory, but perhaps can we somehow find ways of incentivizing really small scale deconstruction companies with education, with I don't know what, with little award programs. Like, it doesn't have to be super fancy, but that if there are ways of recognizing people that are already doing good work, working with the many of the construction companies are local. It's all about reputation. They've been at it for decades. So there's a lot of weight in the choices that these construction companies make, and they're generally trying to do well. And there isn't as much drive maybe for money here, because a lot of the new construction is from pretty wealthy people who are really trying to do well. So just invite that in our consideration of our comments. And I don't know if maybe our presenters have a whole lot to share on that because you work in such a different space, but that is a big piece of our region. Thanks.
We're actually quoting a job on Cortez right now, a deconstruction.
Awesome.
So, and when we work on the remote islands, because we service the Gulf Islands, we typically approach it with, we're going to deconstruct this and we're going to keep those materials on the island because of the shipping costs, and demolition costs are quite high on the islands, because if you're going to demolish it and ship it off island in a mixed load, the ferry fees, the transportation fees are quite high. So an island like Cortez or even more remote, this makes even more sense, and people are more geared toward utilizing all those resources. So
it's very common here when somebody's pulling down more and more common when somebody's pulling down a house, they put a note up on the local online website saying, here are the days you can come and take stuff, and have piles out at the end of the driveway. And so you're right, there is perhaps a little bit more of a consciousness, but less of the regulatory tools. So anyway, Adam, if you get the contract, please come introduce yourself to me. I'd love to meet you. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, Nova. I have a question from Director Sullivan.
Thanks, Chair. I just got a new computer, so I've not been able to find my hand up. I've been looking for 20 minutes. I have a quick question for Habitat. What is the current discount for you guys?
The current CVRD discount?
Yeah, you mentioned raising it to 100% would help, but what is the current discount?
Pat, do you know what that is? I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah, we may have to go to actually back to staff on that, because there's a granting process now that we just worked through last year, Director Sullivan. So we used to pay, I'd say it's probably about 30% right now. We would pay around 12 grand a year in tipping. And I think we're down to about 9.
Great. And I have another question, if I could.
Sure.
I used to actually work in house moving with Pretty Brothers, which is the other local company here in the early 2000s. So I'm really well aware of that industry. They're really the pioneers of and the highest form of recycling, really, back in, well, still. So I'm kind of just curious, house moving was on the list. Is that to engage more with them or to connect them with companies like Adams? Like I've been at Demex like early 2000s and been very familiar. And is it just to boost the industry more? What's the connection, or how does that connect? I just saw the bullet point of house moving, and I'm just curious how that all connects.
Sure. That's probably a question for Sarah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, we're seeing more and more as the evolution of this conversation in other municipalities, that it's become a bigger part of the conversation and moving itself up the hierarchy. Like you say, it is able to conserve more energy and save more trees than anything else. So in terms of this conversation, I just wanted to recognize that we weren't able to bring it in here, but that it is also something, along with a deconstruction that we do want to support and investigate as we move forward. So.
Yeah, I feel like they might have been a nice panel member as well, one of either Nickel or Pretty Brothers. And I'd just like to say that this panel is maybe one of the best panels I think I've seen, and this conversation and these companies and the deconstruction. And I think that something at the landfill ideally would encompass maybe all of these companies with under one building, like a restore, a habitat, sea to sky. Like basically, we need all of these things.
Okay.
Moving
that
forward.
might be a Cumberland thing. So
yeah,
we'll
and also to answer the question about the development permits in Cumberland, we can't even hire enough people to keep it going. It's a quite a long wait because we're just exploding for the last several years. So it's hard to give incentives like that to jump the queue, but it is something to be looked at, absolutely. And that's probably the way forward for the deconstruction and stuff, is making those policy changes. But those are really difficult changes to make, as you guys obviously can understand.
Thanks. You. So I have Pat next, and then Director Cole Hamilton.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having us here. This is an amazing conversation, and I'm glad that Tom is going to be a part of this discussion as I transition away from the role. I just want to make a couple of comments. The first comment is, when I joined Habitat 6 years ago and I walked into the back where all of the magic happens, I couldn't believe how much we diverted, and I couldn't believe how happy I made a volunteer the day he said, I just need a wire stripper. And I said, well, how much is a wire stripper? He goes, $300. And I'm like, done. We brought the guy a wire stripper. Unbelievable amount of work that goes on in the back of Habitats. And the comment I wanted to make is around the community building aspect of thinking green. Our deconstruction program, which we had a pretty solid deconstruction program early in the game, but our volunteers kind of aged out, and it's a tough job. And so the way young people think now, I think there's opportunities to really ramp up our own deconstruction from a Habitat perspective, because I think our people are super keen to help, deconstruct a house. So we used to actually, make pretty good money from it. But the challenge became the volunteers that were so good at it, moved into their 70s and 80s, and it became a difficult task. But I don't want to underestimate, the way we think is a super way to build community through volunteerism, because it's there. People want to help. And so for a lot of these businesses, I know there's some for-profit and some, not-for-profit enterprises on this call, but, people just want to help, and anything to move this discussion further. We're just proud to be a part of it. And, I think there was a few different comments on windows, et cetera. And the challenge for us at Habitat, most of the time, one of the challenges we have is that people want to bring us stuff, and they're, good naturedly are like, we know you can use this. And the reality is we have to go, it's going to go straight into the garbage bin, and then we're going to pay for it. And so we have to make these difficult decisions. And, to the Down Island folks, we'll always take your kitchens. We'll always take anything you have to give us. Our stores are pretty big and ready. And, there's probably lots of opportunities to do pop-up locations. And this is just a really great call. Really, I'm going to bring these ideas to Nova Scotia. So thanks.
Thanks, Pat.
Can I just make a point?
Of course.
So thanks, Pat. I think that my only fear of the volunteer-based deconstruction is I feel like what Unbuilders is trying to do is legitimize deconstruction as a big industry and a big private industry. And I think when you look at any sector, it's driven primarily from private enterprise, for-profit businesses. And I feel like deconstruction to date, aside from the Demexes, there's Western Reclaimed Timber over here, there's a few private enterprises. I feel like a lot of it's been done by charities and nonprofits. And I think that to actually move this industry to legitimize it, it has to be done by for-profit. It's a really dangerous job. I really don't think doing it with volunteers is the answer on site to actually take the building apart. I think the volunteers and the other work down the stream makes a lot of sense, especially like denailing lumber. If we could have our lumber denailed by volunteers, oh my God, we'd be so much farther ahead. I'm sure Demex too. But I do worry that this leniency, even I don't even like the fact that we have to rely on a tax credit to be cost competitive. I wish we didn't. I wish we could offer more purchase price power right away so that we're just competing right against demolition without the tax receipt. But I really think that to legitimize deconstruction and make it widespread, which is our goal, is it's got to be for profit driven.
Yeah, and I agree with you. Nonprofit always has this stain of impact and capacity, and so one of the things we tried to see at Habitat was that we had no limitations, and we started building 21 homes without the money to do it, and we figured out how. And so I agree with you, Adam. It is a dangerous business, and I think anybody scalable with capacity can do it faster and get faster as you do it, and it becomes a safer environment the more you do that as well. So that was another reason that we stopped our deconstruction, is because it was dangerous to those people that were doing it.
Just going to jump in quickly to kind of add to what Adam said. Companies like Adam and ours we're not operating on the same playing field as everyone else. So we are operating in a system that is geared towards the companies that have already existed, whereas moving in this direction of the green, I hate that term, but the green way of building and dealing with things. Adam's company and my company are quite a bit behind in terms of a competitive advantage of everyone who's already out there. So in order for us to achieve our goals, I do believe it's going to be the private companies that are going to make it happen. It needs the help of the bylaws and the municipalities, but we need to be on a level playing field to actually see the results that you as a municipality are wanting to have. So it's very important that we end up making it so that everyone's playing with the same rules and has the same ability to continue their business in a way that makes sense green-wise.
Thank you for that. I have two more speakers. I'm just cognizant of the time. So I hope if the speakers can make their questions short, and then we'll let the panel go, because they've already given us quite a lot today. So thank you. So Director Cole-Hamilton, and then Director Morin will be the last question.
Great, thanks. Thank you, Chair. And thanks, everyone. This has been such a stimulating conversation. I wish I've got like a page of questions, and I realized that, as Director Hamir said, we need to move on. I just wanted to, it seems like there's a lot of appetite for further discussion among the directors here. I just wanted to, Adam, you mentioned at one point earlier that we talked about the kind of the municipal dimension of things. You mentioned you were discussing some issues related to your work with the provincial government. And I was curious if you could just quickly lay out any provincial sort of regulatory changes that what you've been discussing in relation to the deconstruction process with the province.
Well, it's kind of what Chris just touched on. We're not in an even playing field. So the rules, the regulations, and then even what I guess the industry and homeowners expectations have all been geared towards demolition. So people expect to pay $10,000 to remove a perfectly good house, because that's the way it's always been. Well, since 1950, and the regulation is in place for that. And even our public facilities, like I know Heartland, I think that they're moving towards banning this, but they're taking mixed loads. And the fact that they're taking loads of mixed garbage from C&D makes it so demolition contractors don't have to do anything better. And they can get away with a 10,000 demo where they just crunch the whole thing and throw it in a bin and get rid of it. So it's not an even playing field right now. And to make that even, it naturally will start to move towards deconstruction. And that's material bans at the landfill, not allowing mixed loads. It starts there before it even has to hit a regional policy of deconstruction. But my thinking was, in January, I'm literally meeting with like 15 municipalities on a monthly or bi-monthly basis right now to talk about this, which is great. That's the main part of my role. But if we start talking to the province, which dictates building code, we could actually work with the province to have this widespread with the strike of a pen versus 100 municipalities across BC. So that's my thinking, is it's just bigger impact with less conversations.
Thanks. And Director Cole-Hamilton, does that answer your question?
That does, thanks.
Okay. Director Moran, did we lose your question or did it get answered?
I'm okay to leave it. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, I just looking at the time, I first of all want to thank all 4 speakers. I think you were so giving of your time and your knowledge. It's something that, as you can tell by the questions and the comments that our directors have had, it's been one of the more enriching conversations that we've had as a waste management board. So sincere thank you to all of you for coming and helping us understand this this area better. So with that, I guess I have to call the question on receipt of this panel. Is anyone opposed? And that is carried. Thank you. So again, yes, you can do your reactions. Many happy thank yous for that. And we'll get back to the rest of the board. So thanks, Adam, Tom, David, Pat, and who am I missing? Chris, thank you.
Yeah. No worries. Thank you, everyone.
All
See
right.
you later.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So to the rest of the board, it's noon now, and I just want to run something by you. We have another breakout session planned, and then one left over item on the agenda. I know many of us may not have been expecting such a long meeting today, and we are losing some people. I've asked staff that if there's a possibility for us to defer the roundtable on the solid waste management plan till September. It's a possibility. And if we do that, we would just need to do item number 9. So I just want to ask how the board feels. Would you prefer to do that solid waste management plan today and have that done rather than wait till September?
Move deferral to September.
So there's a motion.
Second.
Seconded.
Second.
And any comments on that motion?
Can I ask how long it's anticipated to take?
I think it was another hour and a half of, a deep dive into breakout sessions, if that's what I recall. James, was that the timing on that?
I think, yes, between an hour and an hour and a half with the presentation and the breakout. So
yeah. Okay. Director Moran?
Thank you. I know we should sort of keep in mind how long these meetings are going to be, but it was a bit late notice that it was going to be a longer meeting today. So just maybe for that September meeting or any other meetings that we anticipate to be longer, just to give a heads up, because although, like I say, we should kind of be aware of that with so many meetings, sometimes it's hard to keep track. So thanks.
No problem. And I think many of us were double booked. So are there any other comments on that motion to defer? Hearing and seeing none, I'll call the question. Is anyone opposed to deferral of the second discussion? Hearing and seeing none, that is carried. Would folks like to go through item 9 now, or do you want to break for a bit?
Like to proceed and wrap it up, as
Yes.
otherwise you'll lose more.
I agree. Okay, here we go. So I hope staff, that's okay with you to move item 9 up for if folks
Move
are.
receipt.
Okay, moved.
Second.
Seconded, and over to staff.
thank you, Chair. And I'd like to introduce Vivian Shaw as our Senior Manager of CSWM Services to introduce this staff report. So Vivian.
Thank you so much, James. So through the Deputy CEO to the Chair, this report here, again, our apologies for bringing this late. This came about just in the last week and a half or so. So on June 3rd, Bill C5 received royal assent, which establishes the federal holiday for September 30th to commemorate the survivor and victims, their families, and their communities of residential schools. And this statutory holiday is expected to come in, or will be coming into effect on September 30th, 2021 this year. And at this time, from what we've been able to understand, It only applies to federal government employees, and there's no indication that a provincial holiday will be established in British Columbia. However, given that there is a summer break and this provincial holiday, this stat holiday is in September, we wanted to bring this forward to the board at this time for decision, just in case it does end up being established. So right now, both the Campbell River and the Cumberland landfill is currently scheduled to open on Thursday, September 30th. And given the swift passage of this bill, the member municipalities have expressed deep concerns that a closure of the facilities on the 30th of September 30th of this year will have significant impact on their respective residents and businesses, as there won't be enough time to actually provide notification for the accommodation of an updated schedule. Specifically, of greatest concern is the curbside collection for the member municipalities. So for September 30th of this year, if it does end up being a stat, we are going to strive to obviously work to provide opportunities to bring the intention of this day to the forefront for employees that may have to work, so that they can reflect on the day and the ongoing legacy of the residential schools. We obviously don't have the full detail yet, as we need a bit more time to be able to work through this matter, to ensure that we arrive at whatever we arrive at captures the essence and the significance of the day. And then for the recommendation, we're also looking for future years. We plan to consult with the other member municipalities, determine the best path forward, so that when there's more time and direction to make a more informed decision.
Great, thank you, Vivian. Are there any comments on that report? Director Hillian.
Thank you, Chair. I do understand and support the recommendation. I'm wondering if there's a way of engaging with our local First Nations to respectfully explain the challenge that we're faced with in making this decision.
Thanks, Director Hillian. Yes, certainly we have a regular dialogue that we have with our Comox First Nation Chief and Council, and so we do intend to provide some information to Comox First Nation as well. We've recently undertaken some work with the Strathcona Regional District and Indigenous Relations Coordinator that the Strathcona Regional District has, and so we're exploring how best to bring this forward with the SRD also. So, thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, hearing none. On receipt, I'll call the question. Is anyone opposed to receipt of the report? Hearing none, that is carried.
Move the recommendation.
Moved.
Second, Minions.
Second, thank you, Director Minions. And comments on the recommendation. Okay, that is to that the Campbell River and the Comox Valley Management Center remain open on September 30th. And further, that a consultative approach for future National Day of Truth and Reconciliation will be undertaken with the aim of either full facility closure or modification of service in line with the statutory holiday that will come into effect. Any comments? Hearing and seeing none, I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed to the recommendation? And that is carried. Thank you. So we are at the end of the meeting. Would someone like to move termination?
So moved.
Second.
Moved in second. Anyone opposed? Carried. Well, thank you, everybody. And for those who I won't see for the rest of the summer, have a fantastic summer.